Hey guys, got a, what do we got here? It's a TJ Magna 3.5 litre 7th month 2000 model, V6 of course. Had a few little issues with it, so I've managed to borrow a G-scan as well as a Pico oscilloscope, and I'll try and work out what this miss is. I've got a bit of a miss under acceleration on occasion, that's why it's hard to find, but I'll try and follow the diagnostic path through just to give you guys a bit of an idea of what it's all about. Just going through the G-scan at the moment to see if I can come up with any faults. Okay, so we're going to diagnostic trouble codes and see if anything has been listed there, and as I expected it says nothing. That's what happened last time, so there's no surprise there. Firstly though, what I might do is just do an actuations test and see if I can have a look at the injector cut and see if I can read the settings on there. As we can see there, the crank angle sensor says that we're roughly at about 845, something along those lines. So I'll cut number 1 injector and see what that drops down to. We just cut number 1 injector and we're down to 780 by the looks of things. So we'll cancel that. I'll just make a note of it, then I'll go through each one. So at the moment I've just done an actuations test on all the cylinders, so I've cut the injectors for each single one and I've recorded the results. Now they seem to be fairly consistent across the board. Number 5 sorry, seems to be a little bit over the shop, but that's okay, but they're fairly consistent, so I'm really not getting the information that I need at idle, unfortunately. Had another shot at trying to do injector cut, and this time I did it with my foot on the accelerator consistently at 1750 RPM, and each drop I did was consistently at 1594. The only one that was a little bit strange was number 3, and that was 1625, but it did occasionally cut down to 1594. So I'm going to have a look at the oscilloscope now and see if I can determine under load if there is a miss in that particular cylinder or any of those other cylinders. Now I'm not advocating that you guys hang on to a camera and look at a laptop while trying to drive, but in this case I'm just trying to prove a point. So what we'll do, I've got a nice isolated road, there's no cars around. I'm just going to accelerate hard acceleration from takeoff, and let's just have a look and see what the screen shows us, okay? You can see there that the pattern is sort of all over the place. Okay, let's just stop there and have a look at our information and see what it can tell us. Let's just stop that, turn off our indicator so it doesn't drive me insane. Let's just go back, see if we can get a few frames of what we were looking for. Perhaps I've missed the window maybe, hey? Alright, so we seem to have a few unusual waveforms here. I can see no coil oscillations, no reserve left in my coil oscillations. So that's a bit of an issue. So there's no reserve left. I did notice before, as you can see, it's quite a flat line there. There's nothing really left in reserve. I've just done some testing on all the other leads and they seem consistent. Okay, so I'm just on the peak of another hill. The mist seems to be getting worse, and this waveform that's in front of me is certainly not a good waveform that I know of. I'll just give it one last shot. So I guess the next step is just to pull it apart and have a look at what the issue may be. Well, the other day I was complaining about how cold it was, and I've just come out now to start work, and as you can see everything's iced over. Just a little bit colder than I expected. Let's have a look and see what the temperature gauge says. My hand doesn't get stuck to the door. Let's see what that says. 0 degrees, hey? Nice. So, yes, I think the wisest thing for me to do right now, apart from that's ambient temperature. Yep, ambient temperature. So I think the wisest thing for me to do right now is head inside and have myself a nice hot coffee before I start any work. Yes, a bit on the cold side. It has been minus last night, about 5 degrees I think it was. Might just wait for the sun to warm up a little bit so that I can actually drive the car in and work on it. So according to our picoscope waveform library, this is the sort of pattern we should be looking for, but clearly this is not what I'm getting from this vehicle. It's a new day, new thoughts inside my head. I'm thinking that perhaps it may be a coil issue. Problem being is that the coil is inside the distributor, so there's no actual distributor lead that goes across from the coil to the distributor cap, so that may be a little bit harder to find, but that might explain why there's not much reserve left, which we can clearly see here. There's a couple of wiggles there, oscillation, sorry, on this pattern here, but the one that we have typically flat lines. So that'll be my next port of call. The only other thing I thought of was doing a 4-gas analyzer or 5-gas analyzer. Then that way I can see if it's a lean miss or if it's an ignition miss. If it's an ignition miss, then we will see a higher hydrocarbon level under acceleration, of course, because the fuel's not being burnt. Whereas if it's a lean miss, then we'll find less hydrocarbons and perhaps more oxygen and a few other telltale signals. But I'll have a look at this for starters, and if I can't nut it out through this, then I'll see if I can get a hold of a gas analyzer to analyze it further. I'm just checking the specs on the ignition coil at this point, just static specs that is. I'm going to check the resistance on the primary coil, and that's done through terminal number 1 and 2. Now the specs say it should be 0.5 to 0.7, but I am getting 1 and 0.9, which doesn't seem much at the moment, but it's actually really cold at the moment. I'd like to double check it when it's hot and see if that resistance increases. My secondary, however, is actually it should be 9 to 13 kilo ohms, and I am getting I'm getting 9.6 kilo ohms there, so that's within the range there. But I'd just like to recheck it when it's hot, because that's when this vehicle is having its main issue. This morning when I checked the primary side of the coil, it was quite cold, so I've just taken it for quite a long road test to get it nice and hot, and now I'll recheck the primary and see what that is like. So we've got around about 1 ohm, about 1 ohm resistance there on our primary, and on our secondary I'm getting 12.75. I've already mentioned that I had trouble trying to pick up the secondary voltage on the plug leads, etc., and I couldn't get to the coil because the coil was inside the distributor. But someone mentioned to me that there is on the distributor cap a little raised section, and you can actually use your normal pickup that you put on your plug leads, and you can hook that onto that section onto the distributor cap, and that will help pick up the coil secondary output. So that's what I'm going to give a shot now. So you can see the little raised section that they're referring to that goes between the coil tower output and to the carbon brush of the distributor cap. So I've got my secondary pickup on there, and of course I've got my earth. I'll put it on the engine there, that should be fine, and hopefully we'll be able to pick up some better signals than what we had before. If not, that might indicate that our coil is faulty, which I think it might be, but let's do some more testing and just ascertain that. And we'll store all the patterns at idle 1500 and 3000 RPM. Now this will actually open up in Pico, which is excellent, so we can view the waveform in the actual format that it's meant to be. So if we go back to, as you can see up the top there, we've got our slides that we're going through, and so we'll make a start. We'll go through it one. If we have a look at the current, so I've got the current clamp on the primary side, or the positive side of the coil going in. That appears to be okay. Our firing voltage, we've got a bit of a ripple after the closing of the signal to turn the coil on, and as we turn it off, it gets that spike, of course, in the secondary side of things. So that's our spark height, and we're getting, let's have a look at that, see if we can actually bring that down. We're getting about, 10 kV, which is okay. And of course then we've got our spark duration, which is fairly critical as well. So we'll have a look at our spark duration there. We'll just see what that one measures. Our spark duration is roughly 1.4 by the looks. Yeah, 1.4. Which is okay, which is where it belongs, where it should be. We've got a little bit of coil oscillation there, not too much, I must admit. We've got our current. The top of the current is roughly, 5.9, which is okay. It's not excessive. But as we go through our slides, just have a look at it. It seems okay, fairly consistent. Then when I decided to take it up the road, and as I accelerated, I got the miss in the car. And see if you can note when that miss occurs. Whoa, there we go, check it out. So we've noticed, well, for a start, we've got no spark line here at all, and that is as a result of our current. Now notice our current, rather than being at the 5 amps that we had before, we're getting very, very minor amount. Let's actually have a look at that, see what it is. We're looking at about, yeah, so it's not even 1 amp, I don't believe. So there's a real problem there. Now, one thing I did notice that this, if we go back a slide, our current goes back down to 0. As you notice back over here, there's our 0 mark. I'm not sure if you can actually see that. There we go. There's our 0 mark around there, as you can see. And if we go on to the next slide, our 0, rather than the current coming right down to here, being pulled down to 0, it's staying up at 3.7 amps, as we can see up the top here. So I'm just wondering if it's an earth issue, because that should get pulled right down. I'm just wondering if there's a voltage drop on the earth side of things. I did some checks yesterday with regard to voltage drops, but I couldn't find any. But the problem was I didn't do it while I was accelerating hard when this fault actually occurs. So that's what I'm going to do now, is go out there and hook up my Pico oscilloscope and do these tests again. But I'm going to do this, try and get this fault, I'll do some voltage drops, sorry, both on the positive side and the negative side of the coil that go into the distributor, and see if there is a voltage drop in fact. So that's what I'll do next. According to our wiring diagram, the positive wire that I'll be doing a voltage drop test on is number 6 here, and as you can see, it's a red wire. So this comes from our engine control relay into our distributor assembly. So I'll be doing a voltage drop test at this point, and of course then I'll do it for our earth points as well. So that'll be number 7. That comes down to ground, and I've checked these grounds inside the ECU. They appear to be okay. But I'll do them under load, which is what I was referring to before. So I'm back from my road test, doing my voltage drop tests, and I've decided to do all the filming inside the office. There's a lot less glare than on the road, and noise of course. Now I know this looks pretty ugly, but if you have a look down on my notes here, I've put down voltage drop test on negative wire to distributor coil number 7. So that's number 7 pin there. And while it does look pretty unattractive, there's a lot of noise there, you must admit. But if we have a look at the zero line, that's the important thing there, the zero line there. And regardless of all that noise that you see, we can see that the zero line remains steady, apart from that bit where there must have been a bit of a hiccup or something. That wasn't under acceleration, that wasn't during the miss period. The miss period is when we see all this noise, that's when it's missing. But as we can see, the zero line remains consistent. Now, as you can see, this is a voltage drop test down the notes here. Voltage drop test on negative wire to distributor number 4. That was also an earth wire. So let's just we'll go backwards on this one. And as you can see, once again, we're looking at the zero line here. It's not dropping down to, 2 volts, 4 volts or anything like that. While there is noise, keeping in mind that I did all this at the distributor, so there would be a lot of EMF being introduced into those signals, but as I said, the voltage drop is consistent there. So once again, that's a good signal. I think, yeah, voltage drop test, I think this is the correct one anyway. But once again, we're looking at the zero voltage across here. There's no major drop that goes down, keeping in mind that this was missing at the time. So we're looking for a voltage drop which would go down clearly. Would be obvious that there was a voltage drop there, so that it's fairly consistent across the board. So I feel quite happy that both the positive and the negative side of things are in good condition. So I'm putting it down to ignition coil as being the fault. Got it all back together, got it up and running, it's idling. Hopefully we've sorted out the issue. I just take it for a road test, go through my normal road test, accelerate down hard. I've still got the picoscope hooked up, so hopefully that'll be able to give me some information if the fault still exists. So fingers crossed, let's hope it works okay. So while I don't want to get overconfident, I think I fixed it. I've had my picoscope hooked up. I'll show you that when I get back to the office. The signal is totally different, absolutely totally different. The spark duration is a lot better, the condition of it is a lot better, and the main thing that I noticed was the coil oscillations. I've got, just like the waveform suggests, I should have like 2-3 oscillations left over, and that's exactly what I'm seeing. I'm out here on a road test. I've gone up and down this strip, put load on the vehicle quite a bit, and it's performed really well. The waveform, I want to compare the waveforms when I get back to the office, just to see how they look compared to one another. But it's actually a busy road, that's why I'm keeping an eye in the mirror. But what I'm seeing now here on the road test is absolutely totally different, and the vehicle just feels really good for a Magna, that is. So I'm sure the owner will be happy. It's been a long trial, but I've spent more time on this than probably necessary, just trying to look at the data, to analyse it and to get it clear in my head how it actually should look. So hopefully double thumbs up, and we've got a successful fix. What caused this coil to fail? Well, remember back in part 1 I replaced number 3 spark plug, and it looked like that. What you can see right there is called tracking. It's actually easier for the voltage to go from the outside, down the outside of the insulator, from this point to this point, rather than going across where it's meant to go, this tiny little gap across here. That puts excess stress on the ignition coil, creating ultimate failure. So what's the moral of the story here? Well, this is a classic example of a lack of maintenance, scheduled maintenance. So just because a spark plug is hard to get out, being past an inlet manifold, go ahead, replace them. Don't be lazy. It's important to keep up with scheduled, regular maintenance. That's why we had this fault, and ultimately the ignition coil failed. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a long time in the making and a bit of a stretch of the old grey matter. If you did, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, give it a thumbs up, and always feel free to comment below. So until next time, catch you later.